Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, everybody. Okay, good morning and welcome to our Nostra cybersecurity planning webinar, which is the first of a series of cybersecurity webinars that we'll be running throughout the year. For anyone who hasn't met me, my name is Gary Byrne. I am a Managed Services Director here at Nostra. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and to give a bit of context to the webinars, what I'll say is that Nostra has always taken cybersecurity seriously, and we pride ourselves on always having risk-based conversations with our customers and working with our customers to ensure your networks are safe and secure from cyber attack. We've always adhered to and recommended a multi-layered approach to cybersecurity. Every year, though, attacks are getting much more sophisticated, but 2024 was like nothing we'd seen before. The sheer volume of attempted cyber breaches in 2024 was literally off the scale. Artificial intelligence, or AI, has added a new dynamic to cyber attacks, which is making them much more sophisticated and much more dangerous. It isn't always humans who are trying to attack your networks these days. The volume and intensity that we've seen from cyber attack attempts from AI is unprecedented. It's scary enough stuff, but this is the new normal in the world of cybersecurity. The good news in all of this, however, is that even though threats have become much more sophisticated, technologies have also become much more sophisticated in the battle against cyber attack. We have very helpful guidelines these days in terms of policies and frameworks that can greatly protect you and your customers' data. And these are critical in the battle against cyber attack, and we will be discussing these at length throughout the webinars. Managing risk has always been around awareness of risk. So this year, as well as continuing all our traditional forms of client communication, we'll run these webinars. Each one will be aimed around a different element of cybersecurity and also around the areas of governance and compliance. We have our own dedicated security and compliance divisions right here in Nostra, so we've some of the best cyber professionals in the country right here. You will be hearing from these professionals throughout the webinars. Please listen to what they're saying and please look at the recommendations that we're making to you, because the recommendations are there to protect you. The sessions are best when interactive, so please, any questions you have at any point during the presentation, please throw them into the chat and we will handle them for you. We will also leave time at the end of each of the webinars to specifically deal with Q&A. We will be recording the sessions and we will send on the recordings and the slides to each of the attendees after each webinar. So now, having said all that, I'd like to welcome you again, and I'd like to hand over to our Head of Security and Compliance, Gary Melvin, who's going to take us through today's webinar, which is Nostra's Cybersecurity Planning for 2025. Thank you. Over to you, Gary.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. Welcome, everybody. As Gary was saying, this is one in a number of, I think, about 15 webinars we're going to be doing all around the area of cybersecurity, and that brings with it some of the increased regulation and some of the directives such as DORA, NIS2, and just general cybersecurity good practice. We're going to try and keep the webinars non-technical, so for colleagues or if there's anyone that is overly technical, and if there's any questions, because sometimes we will go into stuff that might be a little bit technical, just don't feel free to ask us to clarify any of the acronyms or terms that we sometimes just use without even thinking. So it's a series of webinars around cybersecurity and how we can improve our security posture, and it's aimed at managers and hopefully people that don't have a huge technical background. So I'm Gary Melvin, as Gary said. I look after the Nostra security side. We also have with us Tom Bambrick, who is one of the senior security and compliance advisors. We've Jason Burns and we've Reg Stallard, all available to ask our questions, and they'll be part of the team that you'll be hearing from over the coming months. So we'll have a variety of speakers covering a variety of topics, which we'll look at a little later, just to give you an overview of what we're planning for the next couple of months. Gary mentioned some changes in 2024. One of the biggest changes for 2024 is probably the global unrest that drives a lot of things around cybersecurity. So at any point in time where we have nation states working against each other, such as Russia into Ukraine, we have the stuff going on in Israel, we have a lot of cyber terrorism going on, and interstate cyber terrorism. That drives out into the market, and then we see quite a lot. So over the last year, we would have seen a lot coming from Russia, a lot coming from China, a lot of stuff driven by nation state actors. Um, this is being powered by AI assisted and AI driven technologies. So where we see that having a big influence is if there is vulnerabilities left open on external facing systems or vulnerabilities or open items in cloud platforms, these are being detected quicker, and there is automations and artificial ways of actually taking advantage of those. So stuff that would have been not detected quite as quick previously is being detected an awful lot quicker. And we have a couple of examples of those as we go through it. So what we're seeing throughout 2025 is a big drive to keep stuff up to date, and a drive that we haven't seen before, that stuff does get taken advantage. So we will talk about some of the vulnerabilities that are out there. Ransomware attacks are on the increase. So the goal for any cyber criminal organization, and these are bigger organizations, they're not one or two people sitting in a back room somewhere, they're run like organizations. They have different cyber criminal outfits concentrate on different elements of the attack. So some cyber criminals will concentrate on getting a foothold on a device or getting an entry point into an Office 365 account, and they sell those then to other organizations who will concentrate on actually utilizing that entry, whether it's an email or whether it's a one single device on the network, and then working their way across that network and eventually carrying out a ransomware attack. So different cyber criminals organizations focus on different parts of the attack chain. And that's something that has came into play over the last 2 years. Email attacks and brute force attacks on Office 365 and cloud platforms. We're going to concentrate a little bit today on Office 365, but any cloud platform or internet facing service is under attack pretty much all the time. As soon as you connect something to the internet, it is being scanned every day. If there's vulnerabilities in that device or in that platform, it will be taken advantage of. We've seen a big sophistication in phishing attacks. So a lot of links with document sharing from legitimate platforms. We've seen the phishing kits that are available for bad actors to utilize. We'll have somebody click on a link. They will not realize that they're giving away their username and password, but over the last year, they're also giving away their MFA code, and it converts into what's called a session token. We're going to discuss that as well. So there's further lockdown being required on Office 365 and any of the cloud platforms to be able to combat that for the moment. Internet of Things devices. This is where we see some devices facing the internet. So one of the advisories we'll be given into 2025 is to have a minimum footprint facing the internet. And we will be also discussing later in the series of how it changes to remote access, and all that is going to change quite a bit over the next year as well. But for now, we're saying any devices facing the internet, limit them to as little as possible. And if they do need to face the internet, such as CCTV or other internet facing services, is to make sure they're up to date and make sure that they're secure. And that's something that is something you'll see flow through these presentations about keeping everything up to date. So cybersecurity really is about doing the basics well. So it is pretty much the biggest piece about cybersecurity is keeping everything up to date. If everything is kept up to date, it minimizes the footprint that can be attacked. This includes servers, it includes softwares that's sitting on desktops, mobile phones, anywhere your data sits. And we will cover some risk management pieces later on in the webinars, but anywhere your data sits, especially your corporate data, needs to be secure. And as your data moves, it needs to be secure at all times. So we're trying to get everybody bought into keeping everything up to date, keeping your mobile phone up to date, same way as keeping the applications that sit on your mobile phone, your desktop, your laptop. Everybody has multiple devices now, so we want to keep it all up to date. Technology moves. Microsoft, for example, Windows 10 is coming out of date later on this year. We have now Server 2022, 2025 is what we would call current versions. So anything that's on 2012, 2016 is getting to end of life. Anything pre 2012 or anything pre 2016 would be called legacy. Windows 11, I think next October for Windows 10 is the end date. So we'll see a big move towards Windows 11. Sonic wall firewalls, which would be in a lot of our customers. Generation 7 is the new version of the Sonic wall firewall. It's been out a number of years, so you will see a push to move everything towards Generation 7. Office 365 Business Premium, we're going to cover that in detail in a little while. And then bringing all that together, at the very end of the presentation, we're going to talk a tiny bit about the NIST cybersecurity framework. But part of what we are doing throughout the series of webinars is trying to introduce the NIST cybersecurity framework and how it guides people and organizations to having a strong cybersecurity posture in place. One key component to that is asset management. So keeping our devices secure, but also keeping our data repositories secure. So when we think about asset management, we think first and foremost, where is our data sitting? What are our data repositories? Is our data sitting on servers in the office? Then how secure are they? Are they sitting on our laptops, our desktops, our cloud repositories, and making sure all of that is kept up to date. And then our assets, which are easier to track, our laptops, desktops, servers, switches. There's quite a bit in there. So asset management is a key component of security and making sure that's all kept up to date. If we look at some of the certifications that are out there, and a really good real world certification is Cyber Essentials. So Cyber Essentials, based out of the UK, has some requirements for around keeping everything up to date. So it's basically saying that critical or high risk vulnerabilities must be installed within 14 days. So we have a lot of customers looking at Cyber Essentials, so they need to be fully bought into keeping everything up to date. So making sure it's any software must be fully licensed and patched within 14 days of being updated as well. So essentially, what we're saying for 2025 is that 14 days is where we see is going to be key, and the recommendation for keeping critical and high vulnerabilities up to date. So, and it is a change. So that is something that is being driven by Cyber Essentials, and Cyber Essentials is a real world, fairly simple cybersecurity certification that builds on the top of what you'll be doing with the NIST cybersecurity framework. Where do vulnerabilities come from? So each coding house, such as Microsoft, Google, they have a tolerance for errors in their code. There's a percentage that is accepted. So in order to get software out the door, there's a low percentage of errors or code errors that's acceptable in their code. So when they push software out the door, they accept there is going to be issues with that software in order to meet timelines for different versions. And then that software code will be corrected using updates. And that's the same for hardware. It's the same for pretty much everything that we have. There's a software layer running it. So according to some estimates, about 50% of software bugs are classified as security vulnerabilities, and these are then classified as being low, medium, high, and critical risk to security. So what we're saying is anything high or critical needs to be addressed fairly quickly. We would have typically looked at doing that just on internet-facing services. Now the big push is all software, all devices, keeping them up to date and trying working towards that 14-day time frame to keep everything secure. What is a legacy system? So in order to keep elements secure, we need to get software updates from the manufacturer for those devices. If we have an operating system or piece of hardware that's considered legacy, then there's no longer updates for that. So what we consider legacy is operating systems like Windows 7, Server 2012. There's quite a few there, and different versions then of firewalls, and all manufacturers move their products into a legacy status where they're no longer providing updates to them. There is some caveats to that. So if you migrate your Windows server to Azure, you might get some software updates for a little bit longer. But in general, there's an end of life date for support. and getting updates. For Windows 10, it's October 14, 2025. That's not very far away. So now is the time to start looking at that and making sure the refresh cycle is in place because you don't want to replace all your desktops in one go. It might be a few a month or whichever way you want to do it. Windows Server 2016 is an extended support. So the mainstream support will ended in 22, and the extended support will continue to 2027. Again, that's not that far away. So having a plan, if there is Server 2016 in place in your estate, is having a plan to replace that over the next while. So this year might be a full concentration on Windows 10. Next year might be some of the servers, but actually having and developing a plan under your asset management policy to keep everything up to date and not having to do too much in one go is a key element to your security planning as well for the year. And then it's not to forget peripheral systems, network switches, UPSs. So in the spirit of not trying to keep this too technical, a UPS is an uninterruptible power supply. It's what filters your power as it comes into the building. It provides a battery backup for power for a small amount of time. So if there is a glitch in the power, your critical infrastructure, such as your switches, your firewall, your servers, won't lose power. That's typically for anything from 2 to 20 minutes, depending on the size of the device, but making sure that's kept up to date with software updates and having a lifetime on it as well. So in any organization, there's the devices we see, which is our laptops, we see the printers, we see a lot of stuff, and that's typically kept up to date. But then there's core critical devices that you're totally dependent on that sits in the comms room that also need to be kept up to date. And these include wireless access points, wireless controllers. There's quite a bit there that needs to be kept. And I'll refer back to the asset management piece again, but that is something that should be in an asset register and a date that it went in, a date it's going to be replaced, and it's the easiest way to manage it. Some recent vulnerabilities. So if we take, for example, that software code has a percentage error rate, then we're going to see vulnerabilities. And we see vulnerabilities in our day-to-day software. We see them in our firewalls. So in October 2024, we've seen a critical vulnerability in SonicWall firewalls that allowed threat actors to have the ability to get usernames and passwords from those SonicWall firewalls in order to get remote access onto networks. We've seen the same thing happen in Fortinet firewalls and Palo Alto and other vendors of firewalls. So there is a core security issue in the way that firewalls are doing remote access. So that's why we're going to see some changes in how remote access is done over the next year. Vulnerability has been patched, and there has been another event in the SonicWall firewall in January of this year as well. So keeping everything up to date is critical. So if you see notifications coming out in relation to external facing devices in particular, they need to be addressed straight away. This is another vulnerability in Fortinet firewalls for anything on FortiOS version 7. And this has only come out January 14th, which is 2 days ago, and updated yesterday. So at any point in time, down here we see severity is critical. It has a CVSS, so severity score 9.6, which is as close to 10. So that would mean these devices, like SonicWall devices when they came out, are susceptible to being compromised, giving away access to networks. And this is something we see in a lot of technology. So my point on all of this is expect vulnerabilities in software, and then we need to act on them as they come out. Other vulnerabilities in 2024 were around Microsoft Office that allowed attackers to remotely execute code on a machine. So if we have a vulnerability in Microsoft Office and a very carefully crafted phishing email, then that will allow somebody to get remote access onto a machine. All it takes is one machine to access and compromise a network. From a machine, cyber criminals can work their way across the network over time, gaining usernames, passwords, and pretty much work their way across the network. Vulnerabilities in Windows 10 is an ongoing basis, and these will continue into 2025. And additional vulnerabilities are popping up in terms of Zoom, Firefox, Chrome, Adobe. So the advisory around this section is making sure everything that's kept up to date. So there's two elements of this. One is, in order to keep everything up to date, we need to know what's on all the machines, and we need to start limiting elements on the machines as well. So if we don't need two browsers, if we don't need Chrome, Firefox, and Edge, a lot of machines will have, that's three browsers that need to be kept up to date, where Edge may be sufficient to do everything you need to do. So we do see a taking back of permissions from user machines, because if a user can install software without the knowledge of the IT department or the knowledge of the managed services provider, keeping that up to date can be difficult, because some software is not easily automatically patched. So reducing the footprint on machines is something that we will see over the year as well. Office 365 platform that is heavily utilized across all Nostra's customer base, but worldwide, Office 365 is probably one of the platforms that's mostly used. And COVID pushed a lot of organizations into utilizing it more. So I don't think there's any organizations that we work with that don't use Teams as we're using today, don't use Outlook for email, migration for SharePoint. So there's a lot more data going into Team sites, going into SharePoint sites. Very easy to access when you're on remotely working from home. So, and we see it being the way a lot of organizations are going to continue to do. But based on that, then we need to add more security into it. So Office 365 is a highly targeted system from cyber criminals, because they know if they can get access to email, a lot of people use their email to store a lot of data, a lot of information around about the organization that they can use. And Office 365 has a lot of features to turn on to keep Office 365 secure, but these features need regular updates and regular tuning. Only on January 13th this year, there's some brute force campaigns targeting Office 365, and this is something that we see changing pretty much all the time. So there's a new cyber attack hitting Office 365 over the last week, and we're seeing this in the logs that we examine on a daily basis. So it is cyber criminals using a user agent or a very efficient way to try and brute force usernames and passwords across multiple users, multiple 365 tenants, and it's just trying to get to that next step and then compromise an MFA token as well. So there's quite a lot of stuff targeting Office 365. One of the elements of Office 365 that we wanted to go through today, and we're going to run a separate session on it in around 2 weeks time or 3 weeks time, is around the security features in Office 365. So not all licensing in Office 365 is equal. There is a license that works for anyone that is 300 users or less, called Microsoft Business Premium. And Business Premium includes a lot of security functionality. If you're on a Microsoft 365 Business Standard, it includes very little security functionality, whereas the Business Premium includes quite a lot of security functionality. It doesn't include all the security functionality, but we'll see from this slide that compared to Business Standard here on the left, Business Premium has advanced threat protection. It has some elements around conditional access and Azure MFA, the ability to do more stuff. And conditional access is a big thing, and I'm going to spend a minute or two on that in a few minutes. One of the biggest elements it has is Intune, the ability for Microsoft to push an Intune agent down onto the device. And when we talk about zero trust in a few minutes, Intune and that agent is a big element of that. So there's quite a bit here in Office 365 in the Business Premium that's not in the Business Standard, and then there's additional security licensing that we can move up to as organizations get larger and over the 300. We can get to E3 and E5, and then there's some advanced functionality around the ability to do document labeling, do archiving. There's quite a bit as you move over to the right. There's more security functionality, and there's more functionality in general across the platform. So our piece for today is we'd like everyone to be on Business Premium as a minimum, so we can turn on additional security functionality in Office 365. One of the elements and the biggest things from 2024 that I alluded to earlier was session token hijacking. And this basically is saying that having a strong password and an MFA token is no longer, an MFA in place is no longer sufficient security in Office 365. So on top of that, we have to put in what's called session token controls, or limiting how often we ask for those authentications on Office 365. So what is happening is some of the newer phishing attacks for Office 365 is sending in links. A user clicks on a document or clicks on a link, gives away their username, password, puts in their MFA token. That is converted to this session token. And that session token by default lasts for about 60 days in Office 365. So a bad actor wants to have that session token, doesn't need a username and password anymore. They can take that off to any browser and put that in and then get access to Office 365. So some of the controls that we implement in Office 365 and recommend in Office 365 is all around protecting those session tokens. And that involves limiting the amount of time a session token can stay active for. So taking that from 60 days, in some cases back to one day, 4 hours for some organizations, but definitely considerably reducing that. The downside of that is that our users are going to be asked more often to enter their MFA code, which we don't get very little negative feedback on. So when we've done this for 100 organizations over the last year, there's no users coming back, or the odd time they do saying, we don't want to put in our MFA code every day. But for the majority of users who understand the risk, they're happy to do it. So, and that does not mean the session token cannot be lifted. It means the amount of time they can be in that account is 1 day. But then we add additional controls on top of that again. Where we want to get to in Office 365 over the next year is a thing called zero trust. So if we have our devices enrolled in Intune, we can start limiting access to the devices to those that are trusted devices. So rather than allowing access to Office 365 based on a username, a password, and an MFA token, now we're adding the fact that they need to be on a trusted device. So if company A has 100 laptops, they're all enrolled in Intune, then for the user in company A to get access to their Office 365, they need to be on an Intune enrolled device. And that device, then we can take it to the next step. It needs to be compliant with a set of rules that you have put in place. So maybe the firewall needs to be on, the antivirus needs to be up to date. And they're called compliance policies. So with the conditional access elements in Office 365, where we're going is we're going to limit, and where we're advising organization to go is to limit access to trusted devices, trusted users, and then also adding in trusted locations. And if users don't need access to Office 365, and I know some organizations on the call don't work from home very little, and there might be 1 or 2 or 5 people out of that organization that works outside the office, then access to Office 365 outside the office is limited to 5 people on their devices. And it ties down things an awful lot. So when we see the sophistication of the attacks coming in, we need to change how we're protecting the organizations. And that's what we're calling the zero trust piece, is we're locking it down to trusted devices, trusted users, trusted locations, and that is working well. Some extended protection in Office 365, and we are doing a separate session on Office 365 on its own, so I'm not going to go into too much detail today. Security labeling, and this is the ability to add labels to documents and be able to automatically do rules and data loss protection rules. So if a document is marked as internal confidential, you won't have the ability to share it outside the organization. You don't have the ability to print it onto the printer. There's different rules that can be tied down based on security labeling. So that's discussions that's happening at the moment, and it's been implemented across multiple customers. And that's how we protect sensitive data. The biggest thing around confidential information, if a document is labeled with the correct label and a user has that document and takes it outside the organization, and that user no longer works for the organization in a week's time or a month's time, if they try and open that document, it's only available after validating their username and password, Office 365 MFA, they won't get access to the document. So the document can physically sit on a device, but if their Office 365 account is deactivated or they have been removed from the org, they no longer have access to that information. So sometimes the files can move, but if the user does not have access to the files, they cannot open them. And that's a big thing for confidential and sensitive information, and would have helped a lot of organizations over the last number of years. So some best practice for security around Office 365, using multiple factor authentication is a must. Sometimes we do get people that don't want to use it, but it definitely is highly recommended, and would be one of the things that we kind of make sure is in place. Limiting session tokens and forcing re-authentication. So you may have some feedback from users that don't want to do it too often, but it is a necessity at the moment. Limit access to those that need access outside the office. Implement data backup and recovery procedures for as we migrate more data into Office 365. We also have to consider recovery of that data. Office 365 doesn't include recovery of the data. So if there's critical data going in there, we need to make sure it is being backed up. Your terms and conditions with Microsoft would do say that they provide a platform. They're not there to provide. You have to look after your data. Stay up to date with the latest security patches. We have a Microsoft Office 365 security score. So that is a brilliant element. The target for that is in around 75 is what we're looking for. But maintaining that security score is a good way for organizations to track what their Office 365 security posture is like. Implement security policies and review these, and work towards zero trust, utilizing Intune. And that's where we all want to get to, is over the year 2025 that we're migrating towards zero trust. Zero trust is not just for Office 365, it's for our desktops as well. So if the software is not on a list that can run on your device, we now have technology that limit that software for running. So there is a lot of stuff happening in the whole zero trust arena over 2025. So conditional access policies is a feature of Office Business Premium licenses and above, but it is a way to tie down and implement all the rules around location, devices, Intune, and compliance policies. That's all under conditional access policies in Office 365. So moving on from Office 365, another essential protection that we're talking about for the next year, and we have been talking about over the last while, is immutable backup. So I'm going to take a minute or so to explain what immutable backup is. And that basically means that once you create the backup, it can't be adjusted and it can't be deleted. You've set a time on the technology for backup has changed quite a bit. So over the last year, you may have heard from Nostra how we were advising customers to move to immutable backup, and that's something that you'll see a lot more over the next while, is making sure backups are immutable. Because as ransomware attacks increase, as security risk increases, we want to make sure that every customer has a guaranteed recovery point. The only way we can have a guaranteed recovery point is immutable backup. If one device gets compromised, a cyber attacker will work his way across the network. The first thing they will do is in order for you to pay the ransom, is to try and make sure you can't recover from backup. If your backups aren't immutable, that means the backups can be deleted. The server that they're on may be attacked and the disks deleted. Cloud repositories can be attacked. So making sure backups are immutable is a fundamental protection for the year going forward. So that's something that we can't recommend highly enough. So immutable backups that can't be deleted, edited, so you know at any point in time you have a good backup there to go back to should you need to. You don't want to have to go back to your backup, but it is something that you may have to rely on, and you want to know it's immutable and can't be deleted. The last thing that anybody wants when they go to restore data is to find out that their backup is not there and it has been attacked, and that does happen, has happened, and will happen. Cybersecurity insurance is another fundamental or an essential protection that we're recommending. So we've dealt with a lot of the cyber insurance companies over the last year or two. The forms that they're asking for, the list of security controls that they're asking for is getting tighter. The recommendations in the cybersecurity forms or what they're asking for is probably what is now recommended practice. But we see cybersecurity insurance as an essential protection for all our customers. So investing in a cybersecurity insurance can give organizations peace of mind and also have a team of incident response professionals there ready to go in the event of anything happening. So that is a big piece. Some of the elements that they're asking for, and I know when we started for our customers 2 or 3 years ago, we got 5 or 10 questions. Now the sheets for cybersecurity insurance are up on 30, 40 questions, and they are evolving. MFA is still a big part of it, so making sure that all Office 365 and remote access has multi-factor authentication. Cyber training, ensure all employees are cybersecurity aware and are getting cybersecurity training, making sure that backups are done and they're stored off-site. Now we see immutability coming into those as well. How you manage access to critical and sensitive data and sensitive assets, incident response plans, PII, how much data do you hold that is under the GDPR and what is PII, limiting of remote access, regular security scans, vulnerability assessments. You will see some stuff now about legacy systems, making sure that organizations don't have those in place, and failure to meet the requirements of the questionnaire. And a couple of the incidents, when we get involved in some cybersecurity incidents where cyber insurance is enacted, and the first thing they will say at the start of any of those calls is, if you have failed in any of the areas of the forms that you filled out, if they find through investigation or through anything that you didn't have the protections in place that you said you had in place, then the cybersecurity insurance is null and void, and they're not going to cover the investigation or the recovery effort. So that is something that is big on cyber insurance. So cyber insurance is an essential protection and something to look at if you haven't done already.
Gareth, sorry, just to jump in there, we have a question from Selena. Where would immutable data be best stored? In the cloud, servers, tapes, etc.?
So some of the immutability solutions that we see, and the most common one we see is the Data One, which stores it on premise for quick recovery, and then it also stores it in the cloud. So I think having an on-site and off-site backup and both immutable, Selena, is probably the way to have it. So we do see a lot of cloud. And the flip side of that is we have seen customers going back to tape as well. I think as long as you have it and if it's in the cloud, then it's perfectly fine. And then we have a couple elements that we work through in terms of backup, is making sure we have the coverage, that it's going back far enough, and that it is immutable. So, but cloud is absolutely fine for that.
Thanks, Selena. Thanks for the question.
So there has been a change then in terms of cybersecurity regulations in Ireland, and some of the stuff that is there. So we've got the GDPR, which has been there for quite a while. So GDPR is all about making sure there's adequate protections in place to protect sensitive information. So if we have an incident and we're filling out a form from the DPC, you will see a lot of questions in terms of, do you have these adequate security protections in place? Nobody is going to say this is a definitive list of adequate protection, because it changes. What would have been adequate last year is not adequate this year. So that is something, and you'll see that coming from any regulator. They're never prescriptive on what you should do, because that's always changing. So making sure there's adequate protections in place. We also have NIS2. So these are new rules that have just been transposed from EU and coming into Ireland. It's around the cybersecurity of network and information systems, so all around critical services, depending on the size of the organization and the services that are provided. but it's there to protect all the critical services in the country. And we've got DORA, which is the Digital Operation Resilience Act, which has came in for the larger financials, and some of our credit union customers are being brought into that later on as well. So we have a lot of increased regulation that we're working towards, and that's something that is going to continue. The good thing about that is that it does gives us guidance and frameworks to work on. So there is an Irish cybersecurity strategy. We have the National Cybersecurity Centre. A lot of the stuff around NIS2 is coming through the National Cybersecurity Framework. Everything with DORA will be coming back through Central Bank. But what we see is there's a lot of commonality, which is best practice in terms of managing IT systems and IT security is combined in both. GDPR, it's been there a while. We're going to do a section. We have a couple of sessions running on DORA, NIS2. We will include what's required under GDPR, but starting at the GDPR requirements and the appropriate security controls and working our way out, we're probably in a good place. This is where we see a lot of stuff happening. So the NIST cybersecurity framework. So when you talk to Nostra around cybersecurity, what you're going to be getting back is not the world according to Gary, Jason, Tom, or Reg. It is what we recommend is following the NIST cybersecurity framework, is educating people against the cybersecurity framework and then working our way through it and making sure everybody is on a continuous improvement process. No matter if we look at ISO 27001, DORA, NIST2, following the NIST cybersecurity framework is going to get you most of the way there. So if you follow this framework, you're going to be in a good place. And this pretty much starts off with the governance side, is knowing your organization, what is critical, what do you need to protect, and putting policies and procedures in place to protect all of that. So starting point is having the policies in place. And we have a range of policies that's recommended to do that. And that includes then moving on to asset management, which we discussed earlier, some risk management. So once we know what our critical data is and our critical assets, then we can do risk management against those and then have some continuous improvement. And then in the middle, which is the purple section, is all the protections. So all the technical controls we put in place to protect our data, our systems, and essentially our people. So protecting our people, our data, and our systems is really important to us. So making sure we have all the security controls in place and having next on a detection piece. So if something is going wrong, which we hope once we have the protections in place, we have our people educated, we have our policies in place, that we can detect if something is going wrong. If we limit our organization to only having a set of applications in place, we've moved away from having legacy systems, then the detection piece becomes an awful lot easier. If we do detect something, then it's the response. Who's part of the incident response team, and how do we manage incidents? And that will reflect back to an incident management document as well. And the last piece then is the recovery piece. And sometimes we start with that. Like, we do want to be able to recover. A fundamental piece of what we want to do is have a good recovery plan, a good recovery solution in place. So making sure that's, from a technical point of view, that's solid. And then we work towards making sure that our planning piece, our disaster recovery plan, we're testing it. And we're seeing under some of the newer regulations and legislation is that the requirement to test that is becoming more frequent. And the advisory on testing that is becoming a lot more frequent. So that is a good thing. So the NIST cybersecurity framework is something we'll introduce more over the sessions, but that is, and you'll see it coming into all the sessions that we're going to run over the next 6 months to 9 months. But it is where everything starts, and then it's like a jigsaw. You're putting it all together, but you know you're going to end up with the way you want it. So it's actually continuous work and improvements in order to assess yourself against the NIST cybersecurity framework, which will then cover you for all the previous and future requirements under legislation and regulation.
Gar, sorry, just to jump in, we've a question there from James McCullough. What tools do Nostra recommend for asset management and vulnerability scanning? Thanks,
Perfect.
James.
Yeah. Hi, James. So the couple of tools, I'll start on the vulnerability management. So there is 2 or 3 vulnerability scanners, but if you have Office 365 as a starting point and you're inside an Office 365 with your business premium, there's now a vulnerability management section. It will give you a good insight in terms of vulnerabilities. It doesn't give you everything, but it gives you a good starting point. If you have Defender for Endpoint on machines and Intune, it'll actually start giving you a score on what's your risky machine, most risky machines, and it'll give you a good insight on vulnerabilities there. And then you've got a network vulnerability scanners like Nessus, and we use one from Kaseya, um, which is a vulnerability management scanner as well, which just gives us, and it outlines what are critical, and any one of the ones that'll outline what under the CVSS score, what are critical vulnerabilities so you can remediate them. But it's a really good point. In order to meet the requirement under Cyber Essentials or under recommended practice, we need to be scanning for vulnerabilities, because if we're not, we won't know that they're there. And it's too hard to manage them without having that weekly scan in place. And what was the second question, Gareth? There was 2 parts to that one.
It was the asset management and vulnerability scanning, Gar.
Yeah, so asset management, we're actually, for Nostra, we're currently investigating 1 or 2 tools. We're currently using spreadsheets, Excel. We're doing it really basic at the moment. Over the next year, we'd hope to have a more advanced one. But in order to, it's very easy for us to use some of our tools because we've agents on a lot of machines, so it gives us quite a lot, but it doesn't give us critical infrastructure components like switches, firewalls, UPSs. So we're bringing those into those, and access points in some cases. We're bringing those in manually into an Excel spreadsheet. So for the moment, for us, it's Excel, but I know Reg is looking at stuff to actually take that out of that and put in a more structured application for doing the asset management piece and doing risks based on that as well.
Gar, thank you. We also have a question in from John Long. Will Intune help to manage endpoint updates and remote access to endpoints? Thanks, John.
It definitely will help doing endpoint updates. So Intune, it'll help you restrict software that goes down onto machines. There is update rings in Intune that you can push down updates more frequently if you define the policy, and it will allow you to not as easy as some other tools, but it will allow you to update third-party products like Adobe, Firefox, and others. So the answer is yes. The biggest thing we like about Intune is it has the ability to restrict access. It gives you a lot of information about the machine, but it has the ability to know when you see an Office 365 log on and it is Intune, you'll see the details of the machine in there. So it'll say John's laptop 01. So we know when we look at that John is traveling, or that is a legitimate machine for that organization. But there is quite a lot of benefits in Intune, and some of those are there. Moving on from that then, so just moving to the summary, and then we'll have any more questions that we have. So threats will continue to evolve. So any time of global warfare, the threats will increase. So we're going to see some stuff coming out of that and even more stuff. So utilization of AI assisted and then moving those to AI powered attacks is something that we will see happening. Stay informed. So we're running these webinars to try and educate people, bring people along. If there's anything you want us to cover, please let us know. We're going to go through the list quickly in a few minutes of what we have and what we plan on covering. Essential element is keep current. And that's something we'll just say to everybody, whether it's your own home stuff at home, mobile phones, your devices in the office, especially the stuff that you see and the stuff that you don't see. Access points in the roof, switches in the back, UPSs, everything needs to be kept current. And then adopting and educating around the NIST cybersecurity framework. So what we want is everybody to look at the NIST cybersecurity framework. You can look at it online. It is lots of resources online there for it. We'll send some links to it. It's coming out of the National Standards Institute in the US, so it is all free. There's great guidance to it. It explains all the elements of it. So it's something that we would like everybody to actually say, yeah, when they're asked the question, what are you doing in terms of cybersecurity? We're working towards the NIST cybersecurity framework. We're getting assistance from Nostra in these areas. This is the list of security controls we have in place, but we have done work on our policies and we know what we're looking to protect. This is our webinar schedule for 2025, and we're happy to take. We haven't put dates on all of it, but we have another one for coming up in 28th, just around cybersecurity training, which is going to cover some more stuff around social engineering and some of the stuff that we see happening. If you have anything you would like to see covered, please ask, because we will change these around. So we are looking at some of the stuff around Office 365. We're looking at the cybersecurity framework in terms of NIST. Then we're going to get into the details around some of the NIST stuff. So we're going to discuss NIST. We're going to put that in place. We're going to start looking at policies then around asset management, risk management, supplier management, business continuity, incident management. And then we're going to get into some of the regulations and the legislation that's been transposed NIST 2. So we're going to look at DORA, we're going to look at NIST 2, and then we're going to map them onto the NIST cybersecurity framework. And then we're going to, Tom and the guys will look at some good practice in outsourcing, and then we'll just do a roundup series as well. So at the moment, there's quite a lot to cover, but if there's anything that you think we haven't covered, please let us know, and we will gladly adjust things around. So we have a couple of the guys to answer questions. Some of the lads should be hearing from over the next while. Reg is not up there, but we'll have Reg doing a couple of sessions as well. So there's going to be multiple people from Nostra doing the sessions, so you don't have to listen to me all the time. And with that, then I'll open the floor up to any questions if anyone has any questions for us.
Gar, just to say thanks a million for that. That was fantastic, very in-depth, tour of all the various areas of cybersecurity. And to say to people, one of the first things that we said at the top of the conversation is that risk management is about awareness of risk. So the next one that we will be looking at, as you say, is the security awareness training, and that's on 28th of January. When we're finished here, we will be sending on the recordings and the slides from this webinar, and we will encourage people to please register for the next one. Details have been put up by Janina. They're in the chat of this webinar. So have we any questions or comments from anybody online? No, Gar, they seem to have covered off with the questions that we took during the session.
Perfect. Excellent. Thanks for taking the time, everybody, today to join us, and hopefully we'll see you. We are going to send on a recording, so you will get a link to recording of the session. If you have any questions or anything else as you go through it, feel free to contact us. And again, if there's stuff that you would like us to cover at a later stage, please let us know. But thanks a million.
Absolutely. And any more information needed, please also reach out to your account managers here in Nostra, and then hopefully we'll see you all on 28th of January. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great day.